Well, after decades of delays, the British government has approved the expansion of Heathrow Airport here in London. The decision has been highly divisive, with much political opposition and concerns about the environment. Heathrow Airport's new third runway won't open until 2025 at the earliest. It'll be built just north of the existing runways between these two villages, which are going to be flattened in part or entirely. It's already Europe's busiest airport. 75 million passengers passed through it last year. Now, the next busiest, Charles de Gaulle in Paris, which saw 66 million passengers last year, followed by Istanbul at 62 million and Frankfurt at 61 million. Now, according to ACI Europe, more than 1.8 billion passengers pass through Europe's airports every year. That number is rising. Well, it's a hugely controversial decision here in the UK. Our political editor, Laura Kuenssberg's been speaking to the Transport Secretary.
We have taken a decision that we believe is in the interest of the whole United Kingdom, that will send a message to the world that Britain is open for business in the post-Brexit world, that will create the regional connectivity that will demonstrate to the whole country that we are governing for the whole country to create a country that works for everyone. This is all about doing what's best for Britain. Now, we are not going to
guarantee that this is actually going to be built.
We are not going to shy away from doing what's best for Britain. We are going to make certain that we see this through. Yes, there'll be challenges on the way, but this is a decision that's been taken after a lengthy process, detailed analysis, much consideration. We believe very clearly that this is the right decision for Britain.
Well, that's the Transport Secretary. The government isn't united on this issue, though. The Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, was against expanding Heathrow when he was Mayor of London. Here's what he had to say.
If and when a third runway were to be built, I don't think it would be, but suppose it were to be, there would be an overwhelming clamour to build a fourth runway as soon as it was completed. And then what would London be like? You know, you'd have New York, a city of beautiful skyscrapers, Paris, a city of light, London, the city of planes.
Well, those in favour of Heathrow's expansion claim it will produce thousands of jobs. Our transport correspondent Richard Westcott reports.
819 right, clear takeoff, wind 060, 11 knots.
Heathrow's always at full throttle.
Takeoff, runway 81.
Planes take off and land every 90 seconds, from 4:30 in the morning till long into the night. They can't squeeze in more flights, so today it's been cleared for expansion.
It's vital for the whole country that we connect all of the UK to the growing markets of the world. That's what Heathrow does. And we've been missing out by not having more links from places like Inverness and Liverpool and Newquay to the UK's hub airport and onto emerging markets.
It's not just about passengers. A quarter of Britain's exports by value leave on planes from Heathrow, things you might not expect. This Heathrow freight firm says they're so short of flights they're having to ship out business to foreign airports.
Expansion is vital. It's going to open up new markets. It's going to prevent cargo leaving from Heathrow on trucks each day out to European airports. We can bring it back into the UK, we can process it and ship it out the UK on flights leaving from Heathrow.
It's estimated the new runway will eventually create nearly 77,000 new jobs and boost the economy by £61 billion over 60 years. That's a new, cautious government figure, much lower than previous estimates. But the road and rail improvements could cost £5 billion. A chunk will have to come from the taxpayer, and some fear airfares could rise to pay for it all.
It's a great aircraft, works very well for us.
Those airfares are a concern for Heathrow's biggest customer, British Airways. The head of the airline's owner says he'll be watching costs like a hawk.
It's going to be a daily task. It's going to be a fight right throughout to ensure that airlines representing our customers get value from the airport in relation to this. Because the airport has a history of inflating investment so that it inflates its rewards. We can't allow that to happen.
This isn't a firework display, it's air traffic control over southeast England, the most complex airspace on Earth. An extra 250,000 flights will mean more noise and dirtier air.
Air pollution across the UK is damaging the health of thousands of people. It's known to cause over 40,000 premature deaths across the UK, and this is particularly serious in hotspots such as can be found around Heathrow. So we really desperately need the government to take immediate action if they really think that it's important to protect people's health from the damage caused by air pollution.
The government's given the go-ahead, but there's a lot of arguing to be done before any planes are doing this on a new third runway.
That's our transport correspondent Richard Westcott reporting. Now, workers have begun dismantling the migrant camp known as the Jungle in the French port of Calais. Buses have been taking migrants away from the camp for a second day, but there are new concerns that hundreds, if not thousands, who'd been living there have gone missing. There are suggestions that many are planning to return to keep trying to get into the UK. Our correspondent Lucy Williamson sends this report.
The jungle is emptying, a little more each day. Empty shacks can be counted, information handed out. Far harder to know for sure where everyone has gone. Mohammed isn't planning on leaving, even though you can clearly see police vans from the water tap near his tent.
I live here. When police broke in for my home, I still in the tree.
You're going to stay in the trees?
Yeah.
You're going to go into the woods here?
Yeah.
There's talk of new camps springing up around Calais even before the jungle has been cleared.
I am coming here to UK. Jungle is finished. Where are you going? No problem. I am going to another jungle.
Another jungle?
Yes.
Where's the other jungle?
It's here. Looking here. It's a really big jungle.
Aid workers estimate that perhaps 2,000 migrants have slipped away to sleep rough around Calais or head towards other cities in France.
We've seen people before that have kind of escaped into the forest where they know they won't be seen. So I think people will try and disappear, at least at first, and then maybe go on to other places like Normandy, other places with ports close by.
Today the pressure began to rise. As the first empty shelters were dismantled, social workers, backed by police, went door to door, encouraging residents to leave. Aid workers have told us that lots of people have left this camp and melted into the fields around Calais. The government says thousands have got on the official buses to leave, but there are still many people living here in the jungle with no sign of leaving. This isn't over yet. Seconds later, a fire broke out. It's not clear how it started, but it's a reminder that as the numbers dwindle, it'll only get harder from here. Lucy Williamson, BBC News, Calais.
Let's go live to Calais and speak to Sophie Long, who's at the Jungle camp. Sophie, how far into this process have the authorities got tonight?
Well, Karen, day two of this operation to evict and relocate thousands of migrants has now drawn to a close. The queues have gone away and there's been no buses leaving here for the past hour or so. We've just got the latest figures from the French authorities, who say that now in total over the past 2 days of this operation, 4,014 migrants have been given shelter. So they've been through the processing plant behind me, they've boarded buses and been taken to what they're calling welcome and orientation centres across France. They're also saying that today alone, 372 unaccompanied children have now been moved to a secure part of the camp and are now sleeping in shipping containers. Might not sound very nice, but much better and safer than the tents they had been living in before. Now, unaccompanied minors, the children here without any families, have been a real cause for concern for a number of the NGOs who are working on the ground here. Save the Children earlier today asked the French authorities to delay the demolition of the camp until they had all been accounted for. Well, it didn't seem that that had happened, and as you saw from Lucy's report, demolition began earlier today. They started to dismantle parts of the camp by hand, and then small bulldozers, bobcats they're called, come in to remove the debris from that area of the camp. We were in the camp an hour or so ago and everything was calm then. A few fires had been lit, some of them just bonfires, others where tents had been set on fire. But in the last few moments we've seen a number of police riot vans and fire engines move down towards the camp. We're about 500 yards from it at the moment. So the French authorities always said this would be a swift operation, and it has been swift, but perhaps not quite as swift as they had intended. They've been very clear about the fact that this camp will close and it will be cleared by the end of the week. But as you saw in Lucy's report, there are still at least 1,000, maybe more than that, migrants still living in the camp, some of them showing no sign of leaving just yet. The French authorities said that they will give everyone as much opportunity opportunity as they can to come here voluntarily, but they've said that they will intervene if they have to.
Sophie, thank you very much. Sophie Long there in Calais. Now, you may remember the scandal that erupted last September when the German car giant Volkswagen was caught cheating exhaust emissions tests. Today, a judge in the US has given final approval to a $14.7 billion settlement. It means they can start buying back hundreds of thousands of cars from American owners. Let's go over to our business correspondent, Michelle Fleury in New York. A huge sum, Michelle. Is this the final say, at least on this part of the matter?
Well, I think on this part of the matter, yes, this is the final say, if you like. It brings together regulators, lawyers for owners of about 475,000 vehicles and VW. They negotiated a settlement and today the judge has approved it. Now that paves the way for owners of the affected vehicles. In this particular instance, we're only talking about 2-litre diesel cars from VW here in America. They can now either sell back their cars to the company or opt to get it fixed. They'll also receive some compensation for all of the trouble they've been through. But this does not cover 3-litre diesel cars. So that settlement, or that agreement, if you like, with owners of those vehicles still has yet to be reached.
Yeah, and this is only the United States we're talking about. Where is Volkswagen right now with the other challenge it faces in Europe, for example?
Well, I mean, we've just heard from the EU yesterday or earlier this week urging the company to do more to try and fix and address the concerns of customers in Europe. Part of the reason is that this scandal came to the surface in the United States, so a lot of the focus has been there. I think that's why you're starting to see EU regulators make more and more noise. Of course, the company had been, at the time that this all erupted in September of 2015, trying to make an aggressive push into the American market to gain more market share. That has really had to be pushed to the side while it focuses on trying to address this issue on both sides of the continent. And at the same time, the company has also lost its chief executive throughout this process.
Michelle, I mean, we heard Volkswagen had set aside an enormous amount of money to deal with all this. Is the thinking that perhaps it will have to come up with even more?
Well, I mean, if you look at this settlement today, it's what, some sort of $14 billion. The company, we understand, has set aside, what, around or up to 20 billion. At the same time, given how many more issues are still out there, it's hard to see whether or not they'll have to put more money still aside. There is the Justice Department here in the United States still investigating. A settlement may be reached there. That will involve more money. There are the sums that the company is paying to its dealers in America. There are lawsuits not just here in America, but of course also in other parts of the world. So the bill is still mounting. The final tally has not yet come in.
Michelle, thanks very much. Michelle Fleury in New York. The United Nations Refugee Agency says this year is likely to be the deadliest ever for migrants crossing the Mediterranean Sea to reach Europe. The agency says more than 3,700 people have died since the start of January, with the most dangerous 2 months for crossing yet to come. The International Energy Agency says renewable electricity has overtaken coal to become the largest source of power capacity worldwide. A new report by the agency says 500,000 solar panels were installed every day around the world last year. China accounted for 40% of all renewable capacity increases. A Canadian nurse has been charged with murdering 8 elderly patients at nursing homes in the province of Ontario. She's been identified as 49-year-old Elizabeth Vetlaufer. The victims, aged between 75 and 96, had been given an unspecified drug. The alleged murders took place between 2007 and 2014. Police in the Australian state of Queensland are investigating an accident at the country's largest theme park that left 4 people dead. The 2 men and 2 women were on a circular raft which overturned on a water ride at Dreamworld on the Gold Coast. Phil Mercer reports.
Witnesses said they heard terrible screams when a raft overturned at Australia's biggest theme park. Early investigations suggest that water pushed one craft into another, forcing it to tip over. 2 of the victims were thrown off the Thunder River Rapids ride, according to ambulance officials, who've blamed a conveyor belt malfunction. 2 other people died after being trapped inside.
That was probably the first ride we went on this morning, and we thought, being quite a tame ride, that our kids would be fine with it. So, yeah, couldn't imagine anything like this happening.
The thing flipped, and obviously there were kids on board screaming.
We were waiting there for about half an hour, and the engineers had to come. They drained all the water out and then had to refill it back up, and then we were allowed to go.
The police say that a crime scene has been established at the popular tourist destination southeast of Brisbane. The Queensland coroner is also conducting an inquiry into the deaths of 4 people aged in their 30s and 40s.
Our thoughts and prayers are, of course, with the families of those who have lost loved ones on what should have been a wonderful family day out. But understandably, what people have witnessed there today at Dreamworld has been absolutely horrific.
Australia's Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull said that theme parks should be a place for family fun and happiness, not tragedy. The Thunder River Rapids ride is described on Dreamworld's website as a moderate thrill suitable for young children. The park will be closed indefinitely while investigations continue. Phil Mercer, BBC News, Sydney.
An attack in the dead of night targeting a police training college in Pakistan has killed at least 60 cadets while they were sleeping. 100 more were wounded. Militants burst into the hostel for trainees in Quetta. Both so-called Islamic State and a Taliban splinter group have claimed responsibility. From Quetta, Saba Etizaz reports.
A night of horrors unfolded for the young recruits of Quetta's police academy as 3 militants wielding guns and wearing suicide bomber jackets broke in and started a bloody rampage, shooting down police cadets and throwing hand grenades. Almost 500 police cadets and trainers were rescued after a military operation lasting several hours. 2 militants blew up their suicide jackets during this time. Most of the victims were police cadets. The local district hospital was filled with survivors. More than the wounds, they appeared stunned by the horror they had witnessed. Abdullah Bukti was among those who hid in a closet as the militants picked off his colleagues one by one. His cousin was among the dead. His were the last cries he heard.
We were hiding in a room. My cousin shouted when he got shot in the eye. Then they shot him in the chest. When the commandos came inside, the suicide bomber blew himself up. There was a huge blast. It threw me almost 10 feet away.
A strange, uneasy silence outside Quetta's police academy, scene of last night's carnage. This is the 3rd time this very building has come under attack, located on a road where security forces are often targeted by militant groups. As the city once again buries its dead, questions are now being raised as to how well prepared the government is to deal with this onslaught. The government admits there is a problem.
You have to be more vigilant and agility has to be shown. Having said all this, we're still all humans. If there are lapses, we will take them into account. We are not shifting the responsibility, we are not ignoring it, we are examining it.
Quetta has seen many similar attacks by both separatists and various Islamist militant factions over the recent years. Meanwhile, in the city, the people prepare once more to bury their dead. Saba Etizaz, BBC News, Quetta.
In Iraq, the slow assault against so-called Islamic State goes on. There are reports of more clashes in the western Iraqi town of Rutba, where militants launched a surprise attack on Sunday. Meanwhile, around Mosul, Kurdish forces taking part in the offensive to retake the city are besieging a key town to the northeast. On a visit to France, the US Defense Secretary Ash Carter spoke about widening the battle against IS beyond Mosul.
With our local partners and the Iraqi security forces and the Kurdish Peshmerga having commenced the operation to envelop and collapse ISIL's control over the city of Mosul. The Iraqis are fighting with skill and commitment and courage, enabled by the coalition. And today, we as members of the coalition resolve to follow through with that same sense of urgency and focus on enveloping and collapsing ISIL's control over Raqqa as well. In fact, We've already begun laying the groundwork with our partners to commence the isolation of Raqqa.
Now we're just hours away from the awarding of the Man Booker Prize for Fiction, one of the most prestigious in the literary world. Let's have a look at some of the contenders on the shortlist. Scottish author Graham McCrae Burnett has 3-1 odds for crime thriller His Bloody Project. The British author Deborah Levy's nominated for Hot Milk, which sees a woman forced to confront her difficult relationship with her mother. Madeleine Thane's book, Do Not Say We Have Nothing, is the favourite to win. Her novel is about a young woman who flees China in the aftermath of the Tiananmen Square protests. Our arts correspondent Rebecca Jones is there. She's been speaking to some of the judges.
Hello and welcome to the Guildhall, where in a few hours we will find out who has won one of the world's most important literary prizes. It promises to be quite a party. 500 guests are expected for a champagne reception behind us, and among them, the 6 writers shortlisted for the prize this year. And for one of them, well, this will be a career-defining moment. Well, I'm delighted to say that we're joined by 2 of this year's judges, the actress Olivia Williams
Hello.
and the writer and academic John Day. Thank you both for joining us. Olivia, you read 155 books as part of this process. Where and when?
Everywhere, in bed, and I wouldn't speak to my family unless they had a Kindle strapped to their face. Other readers are available. On set, at work, I realised there was some danger to reading while cycling, but I would have done if I could have done.
John, with such a packed field, what made the 6 books that you selected for the shortlist stand out?
Well, it's hard to isolate any one particular characteristic that they share, but I think all of us felt that a prize like this rewards rereadability, the ability of a novel to sustain and reveal new parts of itself through multiple encounters. We've all read the shortlisted books many, many times now, and that's the main criteria by which I think we were judging them.
Olivia, by all accounts, you were quite a feisty bunch of judges this year, with people threatening off bridges and throw themselves out of windows if their book didn't make the cut.
Only today, naming no names.
So how did you go about picking a winner?
We deferred to our very fine chairperson, Amanda Foreman, who ran a strict comment, no interruptions, move on to the next judge. And then we went through the full gamut of electoral possibilities, from first past the post through proportional representation to how does this make you feel, and how does this make you feel was the winner option in the end, and we all felt incredibly excited by the result.
It is such an intriguing mix this year, John. You've got a bit of crime, thrillers, historical drama, even a bit of comedy. Tell me then, does it come down to the best book, or is it the best arguments by certain judges?
It's a good question, and I think probably difficult to separate the two, but as Olivia said, once we'd exhausted all our various different voting methods, I mean, it made the American election look like a walk in the park. I think what we settled on was that visceral feeling of first encountering these novels and how they made us feel and how it felt to live with them for 10 months and revisit them. So we put forward all our very nuanced and intellectually kind of advanced arguments and settled on feeling.
Yeah. Very quick final question. Are you relieved it's all over?
I'm still with the euphoria. Tomorrow morning, when the hangover sets in, it'll probably be, I'll be relieved it's all over. But right now, I'm just very excited about being here.
Yeah, I think our families are very much relieved.
Looking forward to it being all over.
I'll miss it.
John Day, Olivia Williams, thank you both so much. And we will bring you the announcement of the winner live here on the BBC News Channel in a special programme, and that begins at 9:30.
Rebecca Jones there at the Guildhall, and as Rebecca said, a special programme on BBC World News for the announcement of the Man Booker Prize, also on BBC News Channel in the UK. That's in a couple of hours at 20:30 GMT or 9:30 PM British time. Now, Carlos Alberto Torres, the captain of Brazil's legendary 1970 World Cup winning side, has died at the age of 72. Though a defender, he scored what many consider to be the greatest goal in the history of the tournament in the final against Italy in Mexico City. He played for Brazilian sides Fluminense, Botafogo, Santos and Flamengo in the 1960s and 70s before a stint at the New York Cosmos. Now, if you want to get in touch, we're on Twitter @KarenBBC. You can also see what we're working on our Facebook page. Thanks very much for watching BBC World News Today. I'm Karen Giannoni here in London.